Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everyone. We are going to spend some time at Nathaniel's place for the next 25 minutes or so. And that is the title of a wonderful book, part of a series written by someone who has not only an interesting history, but it's an interesting topic for the book. And we're going to learn about the process of publishing a book along the way. Let's go to him first. He's the one that helps us get this done as a publisher and the man behind NFB Publishing. Mark Pogozinski is back with us. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Steve?
Super. It's great to have you here. Who'd you bring with you?
So today we have Sinead Tyrone, who's an author and a poet, and she wrote a series of books about a band, Irish band, and it's an interesting idea that you could get a series. Usually your collections are sci-fi fantasy, murder mystery, and that sort of thing. So this was entirely different. And then her latest book is Nathaniel's Place. All of them rooted in Irish heritage, and she also has 2 books of poetry out also.
Wow. Welcome, Sinead.
Thank you very much for having me here. And actually, Nathaniel's Place is not part of a series. This is a standalone new book. And I also have another novel that is not part of a series and actually not Irish-based, and that's The Space Between Notes.
Well, you know what? We're going to dig into those, but let's start at Nathaniel's Place. And the premise, as I understand it, like a dream come true. You come into money. You weren't expecting it, and take us on that journey.
Well, actually, what happened is Maggie, the main character, doesn't know her father. He left when she was 3 years old. Him and her mother divorced. And he returned to his family home in Northern Ireland. And Maggie inherits this piece of property from the father that she never knew, and decides to go to Ireland along with her best friend to view the property, thinking they're going to view it, put it up for sale, and then travel around Ireland a little bit before coming home. The preface goes into the history of the cottage, which is Nathaniel's cottage. Nathaniel is her great-great-grandfather. So when she gets to Ireland, she sees this piece of property, tours through the cottage that is on the property, and realizes that she can't sell it. She needs to do something different with it. So part of the story is what she decides to do with it. The side story is her friend, Brianna, who goes along with her, is very good at interior design. They spend one night at a castle that needs a facelift, and Brianna is hired to work with the handyman at the castle and give the castle a facelift. So there's 2 stories going. And actually, this book was inspired by a trip that my friend Beth and I took in 2012. We stayed overnight at a castle that really needed help. And that's what inspired us. As we were driving around Ireland then, we thought, boy, we should write a story about restoring this castle. And it just kind of became this whole other project because I was able to connect it's not a story about me and my family, but I was able to use some of what I've learned through being in Ireland 3 times and getting a feel for Northern Ireland and Ireland itself, and was able to incorporate a lot of my personal leanings and experiences into the book.
So I have to believe with a name like Sinead that you have Irish heritage. Would I be right?
Yes, you would.
Okay. And I'm trying to visualize myself if I came into a cottage in Ireland from a family member, didn't even know the family member, just the here's a cottage, here it is, show up. Maybe it's yours now. What I would do, and I'm looking, and by the way, the photo on the front of the book is, I don't know if that's the cottage you envisioned, if that it, but either way, I feel like I'm there. And I feel like
No,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
that that photo is actually one that I took in 2023 when friends and I went over to Ireland, and we came across this cottage in Northern Ireland. I took probably pictures of probably 20 different cottages because I wasn't sure which one I was going to use. But when it came time to select the photo image, that was the cottage that I went to. And my friend Beth does all my cover artwork. And I asked her if she could possibly make the cottage actually had a yellow door, but I wanted a blue door because it tied in with the story. So she made the door blue, but that is an actual cottage.
Wow. I can't imagine it with a yellow door, by the way, but we digress on that.
Yeah.
But I try to visualize because my grandmother came from Ireland, and
Mhm.
it, I could get something in the mail tomorrow that says, you have this, you have a cottage. And I wonder what I would do with it. I would take a trip, check it out. Would I keep it to visit? I don't know. What were some of the challenges that Maggie came across in
Well,
her journey?
the number one, without giving too much of the book's plot away, the number one challenge that she has to face throughout the book is there is a distant cousin who thought he would inherit the cottage, and he doesn't want to let that cottage go. So he is constantly trying to do whatever he can to make her not want to stay, because if she leaves, then the cottage would theoretically pass on to him. So that's the number one issue. Plus, an outsider coming into a little Irish village may or may not be welcome. So she has to kind of face a few challenges along that way as well.
Did I hear you right? So if she
If
leaves, it could go to him.
if she decided not to keep the cottage,
Okay.
if she decided, no, it's not worth all of the aggravation that he's giving me, I'm going to return home to the United States and just give up the cottage. And then it theoretically would pass on to him.
Wow, that's a challenge and a
Yeah,
decision to be
yeah, yeah.
made. Um,
Makes it very difficult for her.
the Now I just want to make sure. Now you included the castle in this story. Was that part of your journey at all when you were there?
Yeah, I couldn't use the actual castle that we stayed at, and I wanted to, but that castle has actually been sold and converted to a wedding destination place, which
Gotcha.
is lovely. But the owner of the castle, the fictional castle that I created, does not want it to become a wedding destination. And Brianna, who is doing the facelift part, also does not want it to become a wedding destination luxury castle. She wants to keep the authentic part of the castle. When you see some of these castles, the one that we stayed in 2012 was family owned and it was very authentic. And I wouldn't want to lose that authenticity.
Hmm. Are you Maggie?
Uh, yes and no. No, it's not an autobiography. This is
Hmm.
not about me, and it's not a book about any of my family. But given the chance, I would do exactly what Maggie does with the cottage.
Wow, interesting. Mark, when you got the material from Sinead, first of all, what was it? Is it always a manuscript? Is it an idea and then they continue with it? What is it usually? And then what did you get from Sinead?
Well, I've been working with Sinead for a number of years, and so the process is very streamlined with us. Her books are polished when they come to me. Like she's done all her work, maybe a few edits as we go through the process. She has an idea for the cover ready to roll. So basically, she is ready to go by the time I get it. And again, what I like about her book is her books are the authentic voice. When you read the books, it's like someone's telling you a story, which I think it can be rare to have that. So the voice in your head as you read is her voice, and she's telling you the story. The characters are lively, they're realistic, they jump off the page. So I think that's the biggest strength with Sinead's writing is the authenticity of the voice when she writes about whether it's Nathaniel's Place or the other books that she has written. You get a strong sense of her as an author, of her as a storyteller, and what she wants or the journey she wants to take with her audience.
Let's look at those other books for just a moment. You have a trilogy, and as I understand it, it centers around a band. Am I right about that?
Yes, Walking Through the Mist was the first book. I started writing it in 2009. There was an Irish musician that I was following. He was very family oriented. And Flight 3407 crash happened in 2009. And I sat back and wondered, what would this musician do if something happened to people that he loved? Would he sit back in a corner and lose himself, or would he find a way to move forward? Walking Through the Mist is the times in life when something turns your world upside down and you have to find your way even though you can't see the road ahead. And after people read that, they wanted to know more about the characters, the fictional band that I had created, all set in Ireland, because why not? And so I wrote Crossing the Lough Between. And then after that, I wrote Playing Each Other Home, which ends the trilogy. Then The Space Between Notes is a novel plus 60 poems. It's about a different genre of music. We delve into metal music field on this one. And it was inspired by a real group of musicians who had two very deep losses in their music family one year and continued on with their tour. And I couldn't believe how beautifully they did their tour that year, knowing the losses they had gone through. And it inspired me to start writing some poems after I saw their show. And then it became a novel plus 60 poems.
Wow. Is the novel loosely about their journey of music and loss?
It's about a fictional band, but I was able to get permission to dedicate it to the actual musicians as long as I don't mention them in marketing.
Gotcha.
But if
Wow.
if you look at the book, it'll tell you right exactly. So it's not about this specific group of musicians, but it's about a fictional band inspired by them.
Yeah, it says to me, and I think you nailed it, Sinead, that music is therapeutic. So
Yeah.
I'm envisioning their challenges and where it's like the show must go on. This will help us heal from that loss by performing and
Exactly.
maybe helping others at the same time.
And actually, somebody connected with the band when I showed him the book. He said the exact same thing. That's how they were able to go on. And it's funny because Nathaniel's Place is the only book that I've written so far that's not about musicians.
That is true. The poems in the other book, what's the title of that one?
The Space Between Notes.
Okay. Why did you decide to write poems? What was the inspiration? And is there a common theme?
Well, I love writing poetry. In addition to fiction, I love writing poetry. I have 2 poetry books out. And in this one, after I saw the show that these musicians put on that year, I came home and I was so moved that I wrote a poem about it. Stepping out in faith when you don't know how you're going to do what you have to do, but you have to do it anyway. And then I wrote another poem. And after a couple of weeks, I had a dozen poems. And then the idea for the novel hit. But while I was working on the novel, I was also writing more and more poems. So they're poems that are specifically tied to the story. And when I thought about how I was going to present this, I could have put a separate a book of poetry out and then left the novel separate, but I couldn't do that because it all was tied together. So it's all in one volume.
Obviously, you have an affinity for writing poems. What do you like about it?
When I write a poem, I can say things in a short way and maybe a little bit um, more symbolic way than I can when I write a novel. You have to write a whole story out. In a poem, it's like telling a story in a page or page and a half.
Poems are
And
having
it's fun.
a comeback. I don't know what's going on, but I enjoy
You,
them. I don't know
you
what it
know,
is.
here in Buffalo, there's a very, very strong poetry community. I host a monthly poetry series out in Williamsville. But I know any given night you can find somebody who's hosting a poetry event, and there's a lot of good poet. There always have been a lot of very strong poets in the Buffalo area. And I think what people maybe like about poetry is somebody can write a poem and it's a short piece, but it's exactly what you're feeling. Or it presents a visual that is so beautiful and powerful that it just moves the audience.
Mark, when you look at Sinead's writing style, whether it's a poem, whether it's a novel, what stands out for you? What are you hearing?
I think again, when you read her work, it's an authentic voice. She's not trying to be something different. Like if she tried to write a fantasy murder mystery, that might come across as, well, someone's trying to write this book for marketing purposes.
Hmm.
With Sinead's book, she's writing because she has to write that story. And I think you hear it in her voice and you hear it in the interview. She's inspired, therefore she writes. She's not writing because she wants to sell the book or she's trying to fit it into an outline. This is something that she needs to do, therefore she does it. And I think that authenticity comes through in her writing in every of the books. The poetry, again, poetry is wonderful. It's powerful, it's moving, and she told you that story, she comes home from a concert and you're inspired. And I think a lot of her poems are inspiring like that. They're deep, they're meaningful. And as she says, you can do a lot with poetry in a short amount of space, where the novel, there are confines to a novel. There's plot, setting, character, theme that you have to adhere to. With a poem, you can write what you feel and then craft it from that point forward.
Sinead, do you think that all of us can write poetry? Is it possible?
Um, it's funny because up until 2009, I did not think I could write poetry. And I started writing poetry that year, and I haven't stopped. I think anybody can write poetry, but I think what the biggest thing that I would tell anybody, whether it's poetry or any other kind of writing, is it has to come from your heart. If it doesn't come from your heart, I don't care. It could be a shopping list. If it doesn't come from your heart, it's not going to be good.
Mm, that is really, I believe, the secret to life. Even if you think something, they say what we think becomes our reality. And some people believe that you can manifest whatever you want if it's coming from your heart. Yeah, we can think, I would love to have that red sports car. That would be fantastic. I'd love to win the lottery. Those are just thoughts. When it's coming from your heart, it's genuine, it's resonating, it has a certain vibration. I want to go to the series about the band.
Yes.
And then the other book, about music and a band. Um, what's your connection there? You love music, you love going to see live music. What's going on?
I have loved music ever since the 1960s when the British invasion came about, when the Beatles took the stage at Ed Sullivan. I was hooked. And when the British invasion happened, I was hooked. And I have always loved music and I've always loved books.
Hmm.
So at times when I was growing up, and growing up was not always an easy process, books and music were my friends. So I've always been fascinated about musicians' lives. I've always wanted to know, what is it like when you're not on stage? What is your life like? What drives you to do music the way you do? So I've always been curious about this. So when the idea for this book came along, it was very natural for me to write about music. And it was very natural for me to write about Ireland because I was passionate about Ireland. So in each of the books, I am telling stories about musicians. You know, when you think about how musicians impact our lives, we all have musicians that are our favorites, and how they inspire us, or write a song, present a song that speaks to exactly what we're going through. I actually heard Paul McCartney in an interview on a radio station recently, and he talked about how writing songs will sometimes give a voice to what a person is feeling, and that song that they write becomes very, very connected to a person. And we all have songs that are very, very meaningful to us for different reasons. So to write about a band, to write, and in each of the musician books, the three books in the series and the other one, I try to portray musicians as real people, not as the idols that we see on stage, but who they really are behind the scenes as real human beings going through the same everyday challenges we all go through.
Mm. You echo what I think about when it comes to music. Love music, have, since I was a kid, call it therapy, even as a kid. And I found myself looking deep into lyrics in the last year. Songs I've
Yes.
heard a billion times. By the way, I play music on the radio. As a matter of fact, this is today's music log, and I'll be recording this in just a few minutes. And we're talking about 80s and 90s, a little bit of 70s in there. But so I must have played 8 million songs on the radio in my career. I try to figure that out. It's a moving target. I'll look at song lyrics of songs I've heard and played tons of times and find different things in there. I find it's
Yes.
almost fascinating, or interpret them a different way when you go back to look
Yes.
at it. And it's almost as if it's endless, in terms of the feeling connected to the song.
And that is part of the connection with poetry, because you
Mm.
can read a poem 5 dozen times and each time catch something different in it, because part of it relates to what you're going through at a moment. I could read a poem by Robert Frost, and maybe it's a poem that I read 20 years ago, and what it meant to me 20 years ago is valid, but what it means to me now might be valid in a different way. And it's
Totally
the same.
got you.
Yeah.
It's so true. Mark and I had this conversation about music a while back, and pretty much almost the same conversation, right? Where we're, talking about different songs, and I gave an example of a song that came out in 1974 by the band Chicago. I've been searching so long. When I used to hear that as a kid and, young adult, I'd be thinking, oh, it's about love. I've been searching for love. I've been trying to find, that person in my life. Now, when I look at the lyrics, and this is what the song is about. I never really realized it. It's about searching for the answer to life. What is the meaning of life? That's what it's
Wow.
about. I never knew that.
And that's so true. But I think too, as listeners, whether it's poetry or music, and Paul McCartney mentioned this too, we put into any listening what we're going through at the moment.
Yeah.
So, there are song lyrics that, okay, whiter shade of pale. What do the lyrics to whiter shade of pale mean? I mean, that's probably a lifelong study right there.
Mm.
What I would have thought it meant back in the 60s when it came out, when I was young, now I would look at the song and maybe see something completely different.
It just popped in my head, and I got you on that, Procol Harum of that song. How about Nights in White Satin? And at the
Yes.
very end, where the song fades out, it's a
Mhm.
poem. Breathe deep. It's
It
a
is.
poem.
It absolutely is. That's an excellent example of really a poem that was put to music and came to life.
Kind of crazy. And at the end, if you listen to the long version, there's no music. There's
Yeah.
just a little, and at the very end, it goes into an orchestral ending, if you will. But he's just speaking, and it sounds like he's reading a poem. It's kind
Yeah.
of profound. Sinead, what's your advice to somebody who thinking about writing, whether it's a poem or a book, they feel it in them, but maybe they're a little shy, maybe they're afraid of expressing themselves, maybe fear of judgment, whatever it might be. What's your advice to
Well,
somebody?
I'm going to give a couple of pieces of advice. Uh, Part of it is applicable to poems. It's more applicable to writing books. Part of it is what Mark said, in that you don't want to tailor anything you're writing to what you think is the current popular genre that's going to sell. You have to write from your heart. So that's the very first thing. The
Mm.
second, when I wrote my first book, I was terrified. I was terrified of the process. I got it written. I made the mistake of comparing myself to another writer who I love and realizing my book was crap. I wasn't even going to put it out. And my friends kicked my butt and they said, fix what you need to fix it and then send it out. And so you have to face the fear, but you have to, every time I start a new book, it's a whole new process of fear, but you have to push past the fear. And the third thing I would say is write what's in your heart. Just write it down. You can go back and edit it. You can go back and fix it later, but write it down first. Don't be your worst critic. Just put the words out and then take a step back and fix them.
Thank you for that. I have one final question. In all the things that you've written, would you feel that it's helped you express yourself, maybe even heal from something? I'm broadly saying this. Has it helped you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because each of the books, there's characters that are going through difficult things. And my life is great. I'm not going through anything difficult at the moment, but we've all have our difficult moments. And as I write, it helps me to look at things in different lights, and it helps me to release some emotions. And especially when you get into poems, you can really release a lot of emotions, put things out so that you're not carrying them around. You get them out and then you move on. So yes, it definitely.
Love it. And that's why your stuff is so good. Wow. Mark, there's proof that somebody, you're thinking about writing a book and hearing the admission that she's uneasy every time she writes a book. People can do this, though. It can be done. You can publish your own book with your help. How do we start with this, Mark?
We have a website, nfbpublishing.com. There's a simple form to fill out, and that starts the process. And you can also find all of Sinead's books there also.
Yeah, and you walk the journey with everyone from the very beginning. It's not like, somebody reaches out and then they're done. It's everything. It's the marketing. It's the cover if need be, although she had her own photo and somebody to help her out with that. But the whole process, it's wonderful. nfbpublishing.com. Mark, Sinead, thank you for being here today. Wonderful hearing the publishing process, the writing process, and wasn't expecting the music. So that was actually really cool today. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I just say, Mark is an absolute dream to work with. I love working with NFB Publishing, and that's the only place I would go.
Thank you for saying that. Like his passion shines through, and his passion helps show the passion of others. Thank you both. Looking forward next time we get together.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.